Hello, everyone. I'm Brian Callanan. I'm a host and producer here on the Seattle channel, and I'm here right now on behalf of the mayor's office to moderate a public forum so that we can introduce everyone to the finalists for the job of director of the Office of Police Accountability. Now, the director of the OPA is appointed by the mayor and confirmed by the city council and is appointed to serve a 4-year term. There's a possibility of a director being reappointed to a second or third 3-year term for a maximum of 12 years. So the city received more than 150 questions from the public regarding this position, and the Seattle Human Resources Department sorted out which topic areas had the most interest and pulled out 6 questions to ask the candidates. Each candidate, I'll be talking with all of them, will appear by themselves to answer these questions, and the order is random in terms of how the candidates will appear. I have also got some information here with regard to how we will conduct this. The candidates will have 3 minutes to answer each of these questions, but they do not need to take up all the time. If I need to ask for a brief clarification, I might do that, but I'll be using a stopwatch to make sure that each candidate stays within that 3-minute time frame as close as we can, basically to ensure that each candidate gets as close as we can to an equal time allotment. So to begin, let's get right to it here. I will introduce you to our first candidate that we'll be talking with, and that would be Janelle Harris. She is the program director of the Felton Institute in San Francisco, California, and former Oakland police commissioner from the Bay Area. Janelle, thanks a lot for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you this first question we have here. Again, these were questions that came in from the public, and we'll pass it along to you here. What is your track record for holding police officers to account for their actions and decisions?
So I'm just going to jump right into it. Well, first, I was instrumental in the investigation of the Pollock case, which resulted in 5 officers being terminated, which led to the discovery of a social media scandal, which was initiated by one of the terminated officers. After an investigation on the social media scandal, the officers was found sustained for being racist. He quit the department before the outcome of the investigation was done and was hired by another department close by. The result was a social media policy being rewritten by the police commission. The OBOA open letter complaint, I was instrumental in providing facts to the commission in regards to the allegation of misconduct of racial discrimination in hiring practices of an executive level commander and within the department. I addressed complaints against multiple OPD officers in the George Floyd protest. The result was a new policy written. I was instrumental in the initiation of the reopening of a 10-year complaint investigation of misconduct by an executive level commanders. The complaint was 10 years old upon my swearing in as a police commissioner. The case is currently under review by the OIG office.
Got it. Thank you. Did you want to continue on that? Please do. About a minute and a half. Go ahead.
I brought forth 151 policies that have been outdated for 20 plus years. As a commissioner, I held the chief, as a police commissioner, we held the chief of police accountable for not investigating allegations of race discrimination within the department. I initiated the Hines report, so you can look it up. Initiated the reorganization of the CPRB, now the CPRA, have gone through 2 executive directors to date. I created a new job description for the executive director for the CPRA to date.
Got it. Thank you very much for that. I wanted to make sure I moved on to our second question here. What will you do to separate police oversight from police, who historically protect and defend themselves against accountability and oversight?
So that level of change or shift comes from police department culture changes. It comes from the police department leadership on down, and it comes from within. I am only a piece to the puzzle, but it cannot start with me.
Got it. Just to clarify on that, this idea of trying to separate the concept of sworn officers being involved with this, you're trying to be that. I just want to try to explain what your role would be and how you would see it. Could you delve into that a little bit further?
Well, the role of the POA director is to make sure that investigations get investigated thoroughly and in a timely fashion, and make sure that justice is swift. According to the legislation, we are only allowed to give recommendations. So where I come from, which is Oakland, our police commission actually has teeth, and we oversee the department policies, procedures, and we have the authority to fire the chief of police.
Do you think, just because we have a little bit more time on this question here, does Seattle's program need more teeth? Your thoughts about that?
In my own opinion, and mine alone, I would say yes. The way the legislation reads, the police chief can take the recommendations of the OPA director or not, ignore it, and does not have to give explanation. And I find that unacceptable.
Okay, thank you for all that clarification there. I'm going to move on to our next question here. This whole idea of what prevents officers from being held accountable, what have you seen in your experience, Janelle?
Well, legislation called Law Enforcement Officers' Bill of Rights, or Police Bill of Rights. This legislation causes frustration due to the inability of community and elected officials to hold police officers accountable for misconduct, and the inability to create reform within a police department. Difficulties are often due to police unions' power derived from the contracts or from POBAR. There's also the fear of police officers telling on one another. Accountability would work if we all held each other accountable. There must be organization to pursue ballot initiatives and public education to win those initiatives.
Got it. What type of initiatives are you talking about here? Can you delve into that a little bit?
Well, police have protections that most civilians don't. I can give you an example.
Please.
In Oakland, we had something that they are calling a sex scandal. It involved a 16-year-old girl that was being passed around by multiple people in different police departments in different cities, and they called it a sex scandal. Now, in the civilian world, we call that child rape or child molestation. Had they been a civilian, they would be in jail and registered on the sex registry. But because they have these protections that protect them, there was minimal discipline issued.
Can I ask just briefly on this question, what has your interaction been like with different police unions? I have about a minute and a half left here, and I thought I'd bring that up.
Personally, I have not had to have the pleasure of sitting at the table with the police union, but I was a police commissioner for 3 years, and I was the vice chair for 2 of those 3. And so I am very vocal about where I stand. The first thing that I was asked when I became a police commissioner is, what is the goal here? And the goal was to dismantle the Police Bill of Rights. I think if there is something at stake, then people will behave themselves. And that's what we want. We have really good police officers that get overshadowed by the bad ones, and it's not fair.
Thank you for breaking all that down. I'm going to move on to the next question here, if I may. And that question is this. This is a bit a chunkier one, if you will. There's a lot to this. So what have you done to reach out directly to the community, especially the BIPOC community, to build trust and communicate how you are keeping law enforcement actions transparent and accountable? Specifically, what does accountability and transparency look like?
So I start with the most impacted community, which is where I live. I build relationships with many people from all walks of life. I made it a point to always make myself available to the community and not just through email. I volunteered to be a liaison for 2 separate families for investigation purposes. One for the disappearance of a young black boy who is still missing to date. Out of that came a new missing person policy, which I participated in as well. For a case, another case that had not properly been investigated, where discrimination from executive level officials had been alleged. It was ongoing for 10 years and no one seemed to care about it. So I became the liaison for that community member. They would constantly come to police commissions, and you have 2 minutes to speak your piece and then you just go away, right? And I wanted to do something about it. I always do what I say, and I say what I mean with community. community. Integrity is very important to me, and I must display what I want to see. My motto is truth over peace, and you will hear that from me all the time. BIPOC must be allowed to be their own experts, and to date, that does not happen. I'm very transparent with community because it is necessary no matter what the outcome.
What does that transparency look like, though? How do you, when you would see that in your job, can you describe an example of that?
Well, for me, it looks like telling the truth and dealing with the consequences. There are laws and policy put in place for a reason. Policies helps keep everyone involved safe. That is the purpose of policies. However, in my experience, they were not looked at as important because so many were not updated in 20 plus years. Oakland has had 14 chiefs since 1993. Transparency is being honest and owning your mistakes and moving forward.
Great. Thank you for breaking down all those pieces with me. I'm going to move on to this next question here. What do you perceive the role of the OPA to be in broader discussions around public safety? And also, what alternative response models and services interest you, and will you actively advocate for these being developed in Seattle if you become the director?
So in order to understand the role, one must understand or hear the wrongs that have been done to communities around the nation. Public safety does not look the same for all people, especially BIPOC. In a perfect world, it would. We have to understand that policing was derived from slavery. We cannot deny that. However, there are many good officers that want to see the community at peace and safe. I think we need to decide what role our officers play in the community so that they can focus on being the best of the best. I see the OPA role as being a gatekeeper, making sure that looking into misconduct is done fair, proper, and in a timely manner always.
And talk to me about some of those alternative models of public safety. We're talking about that a lot in Seattle right now, something where perhaps non-sworn officers would be involved. Some thoughts about that? Would you advocate for that as an OPA director?
So I'm all about partnerships. However, a partnership takes two parties to participate. I believe in Oakland's model because there are consequences for those who dispute accountability, but it starts with legislation, as I said previously. Without that, my efforts would be for nothing. This position comes with very high cost if you are truly about public safety and community. It seems almost impossible to complete the task without resistance from those we hold accountable.
Got it. Thank you very much for that. I wanted to ask the final question here. What would be a key indicator of success for you as an OPA director if you're selected for this position?
So I would say establishing and building a true collaboration between law enforcement and community, being on the same page as far as accountability goes. And I use the Celeste Guap case as an example, right? Wordsmithing is common, right, in accountability, and I don't think it's right. You know, we call it for what it is. It's not a rape scandal, it's a child molestation case. And yes, we had officers that were involved in it, but again, we have some very good officers that get overshadowed because of things like this. And so, you know, we need to own the wrongs that have been done. And that's a good start.
Okay. I wanted to ask one question just because we have a couple minutes left here. Do you see similarities from Bay Area, where you're from, and Seattle with regard to the police public safety situation? I know it's a bigger area down there, but are there some similarities and maybe some learnings you can bring from the job that you could use here in Seattle?
I do. I see a lot of similarities. I also know that Oakland is past where Seattle is at right now. We had a lot of bumps in the road. It was very challenging. And, you know, the police commissioners in Oakland are volunteer. So they don't get paid for their efforts. And it's a full-time job, right? You have to go to your job that pays you, and then you go to the one that doesn't. And which one is most meaningful? right? But we do and have done a lot of good work. I think, we lead by example. Have we made some mistakes? Sure. We were the first 7, and I think we've accomplished a lot. I was the chair of the Use of Force Ad Hoc, which is, has produced the most progressive policy in the nation. Is it great? No. Is there room for improvement? Absolutely. But I think it will do with the parameters that we have.
Great. You have about 45 seconds left. Is there any sort of closing statement you wanted to throw in there, Janelle? Anything at all about...
Well, I just wanted to thank the City of Seattle for having me and recognizing the work that I do. Again, it's truth over peace. So thank you.
Thank you very much. That's Janelle Harris, one of the candidates for the OPA director job. And what we will do right now is take a quick break to bring in our next candidate. Please stay with us. We'll be back in just about 5 minutes or so. I'm Brian Callanan, back with you here on Seattle Channel as we continue our public forum and introduce you to the finalists for the job of Director of the Office of Police Accountability for the City of Seattle. And next up, it's Eddie Aubry. He is the Civilian Manager for the Office of Professional Accountability in Richmond. And Eddie, good to meet you. Thanks very much for taking the time.
Nice meeting you there.
Yeah,
thank you.
I wanted to make sure I got through these questions with you, and as I told you, I'll be using this little timer here, but I hope we can have a good discussion about this. Let's talk about this first one. What is your track record for holding police officers to account for their actions and decisions?
Well, one of the things that I've done at the Office of Independent Review in Fresno, where I was the independent reviewer, is that I completed an audit report that contains several officer-involved shootings and findings on those. And that report was actually used in the wrongful death federal lawsuit of a Latino man that was shot by a Fresno police officer. And because of that report, it helped influence the judgment or the settlement of that particular case. The second portion of it there is my work as OPA in Richmond, and in that I have completed about 6 years of work there, and what we do is we look at sustained findings. Now I know in OPA here in Seattle, their sustained findings range from 18 to 26% for the last 2 years. Before I got to Richmond, it was about 30%. So in the last 5 years average, our sustain rate is about 50% of our investigations.
Wow, that's a number that needs to increase here in Seattle. Is that where we're going with this? What can you tell us about that?
Well, it's always dependent upon the cases, the investigations, and how thorough they're completed. And that's one of my strong suits there, is to make sure that they're thorough, they're fair and neutral and unbiased, and it completes the entire investigation, not just portions of it.
Got it. Just because we have a couple of minutes left on or minute and a half left on this one, can you explain to the public what that sustain rate means? When you're saying that, what does that mean to the average person out there?
Oh, okay. So for our findings, we normally have different classifications. Sustain means that the misconduct actually occurred. Not sustain means that they couldn't prove one way or another that it was that the misconduct occurred. And then there's a couple other different categories. So when we get an investigation, we start an investigation, we look at by a preponderance of evidence whether or not the actual misconduct occurred. So that's when we look at the entire case, we look at the allegations, we complete all the interviews, and we look at all the evidence, we look at various pieces of evidence gathered from everywhere, and that's when we put it all together, and then we make a decision on that, and I certify that decision.
Got it. Just 30 seconds left. I just wanted to know on this one. Do you have an idea why Seattle's sustain rate is low and what could be done to improve it?
No, I've actually looked at their findings categories.
Yes.
And one of the things that I see there is that they have different categories, and I think they actually are finding that there has been violations of policies there, and I think that might influence that, and it would give the citizens a better outlook on what OPA is actually doing, and it will reflect more of their work, and I think that will help the citizenry see exactly what's happening out there.
Perfect. Time's up on that one. Thank you for breaking all those pieces down with me, Eddie. I wanted to talk about this next question here. What will you do to separate police oversight from the police, who historically protect and defend themselves against accountability and oversight?
Well, that's a really good question, and it's a big question. So I think one of the things that we need to do is examine different models of oversight in the United States. One of those models is in Chicago through COPA office, where they have a lot of civilian investigators, and most of them are, and they have some law enforcement experience. But the other thing that we're doing here in the state of Washington is they started the Office of Independent Investigations, which starts on July 1st. And my discussions with the governor's office in regards to that particular program is that they are going to instill two different categories. They're not going to have sworn officers as investigators. Now, they will have retired officers as senior investigators, and then they'll hire investigators that are completely civilians. The senior officers will train and show the ropes to the younger officers, and during a transition period of maybe 4 to 5 years, then those senior officers will phase out, but the civilian investigators will then have enough work and experience to take over those positions, which would make it totally civilianized. Now, so I would advocate something similar or a transition like that here, but there's 3 benefits to that whole thing. Is that right now there's a 2-year rotation of sergeants that come in and out, which means you have to train those sergeants. The second benefit is the civilian employees will stay longer than 2 years, and the last benefit is those police sergeants that are currently there can be reassigned to patrol duties, actually working the streets and doing those kind of jobs where we have a difficult time, where the police department has a difficult time in retention of officers right now.
Got it. Got a minute left. You mentioned that piece about the state. How would the city and state work together on these kind of cases? Can you touch on that issue, please?
Well, that's something that they're still trying to work out since
see.
the program is very new
Right.
with the OII's Office of Independent Investigation. So they're still trying to work that out,
Okay.
and that will be worked out with the Seattle FIT team, their force investigation team, and their criminal division to go ahead and really put that together, because right now they have they have several different investigative units throughout the state, and so those units will assist the OII. So it's a process that has to be put together, and I'm hopeful that OPA and the accountability model here in Seattle, including the Office of Inspector General and the Police Commission, will be part of that discussion to see how that works, because they are focused specifically on criminal prosecution investigations.
Okay. Thank you for breaking all those pieces down with me, Eddie, there. I wanted to talk about this third question with you here that we've gotten from the public. Again, these whittled down from 150 questions that came in from the public. This question goes like this. What prevents officers from being held accountable? What have you seen in your experience?
Well, in my experience throughout my varied career, one thing that and I don't want to presuppose that all officers are not being held accountable, but what I do want to say is that what I've seen is it's the police culture. And in that police culture, there's values in the police culture which will help alleviate the culture, the culture issue. There's values there, and one of them is a duty. Officers really respect the value of duty. And one of the things that I've been investigating and working in Richmond about is the duty to intercede when there's a use of force case going on, and the officers should go ahead and intercede and stop that, or a duty to report some of those use of force cases or other misconduct that they see. Those things, we're taking a deeper dive at OPA in Richmond and looking at those kinds of things, because that's where you're going to start seeing the culture shift. When officers value and they can go ahead and speak and talk and report those things and stop those things, that value and duty to stop and intercede, it transforms into everything else. Their duty to protect citizens, their duty to stop other things they see on the street, their duty and values to say, hey, I am going to do the best job I can. Not that they aren't doing that now, but that duty is a strong value in law enforcement, and that will go ahead and really turn the tide and make massive change in the culture.
Thank you. Got a minute and a half left on this question in particular. What's been the reaction of rank and file officers to that ethic or that directive that you're trying to take in Richmond?
Well, you know, what I've seen, and obviously because there's confidentiality.
Of course, yes.
Laws and rules. But what I've seen is that first, there's always a discussion on, okay, so who's the duty belong to? Does the duty belong to the officer? Or does the duty belong to the supervisor supervising the officer?
No.
Or does it belong to both? And how strong should that duty be? How in-depth should that review be? For instance, in a review of use of force, the officer says that X happened with the use of force. The supervisor comes and asks, well, okay, what happened? Well, X happened in the use of force. Well, how deep does that investigation go into? But when there's a duty to report and a duty to intercede, and that whole philosophy of duty, then the officer's much more willing to, not willing, but is more forthcoming and says everything that's going on. And the sergeant says, hey, I have a duty to make sure I look under every rock, get every answer, look at everything to make sure what happened out here.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. I wanted to ask this next question here. This one is a big one. There's a lot to this one here. What have you done to reach out directly to the community, especially the BIPOC community, to build trust and communicate how you are keeping law enforcement actions transparent and accountable? Specifically, what does accountability and transparency look like to you? Big question here.
That is a really big question. So I think my experience as the Office of Independent Review in Fresno will give a good example of that. I started that particular office, and I had a staff of 1.5. It was supposed to be larger, but of course budgets affected that. So I had a staff of 1, and we were titled maybe called a toothless model, where we could only make recommendations. So my job when I got there was to say, how can we make this work? How can we make this effective? How can we impact police services and build trust with the community? So what I did was, it was a massive undertaking by myself, where it was a complete community outreach. I worked with city council, I worked with stakeholders, I worked with the BIPOC community, faith leaders, and we worked hard, and I met with them. We talked about issues. We had question and answers. I asked them what they wanted there. I worked with the CCCJC in Central California and used them as an ad hoc police commission, even though there wasn't one there. And so it took a year of work and reports. And one of the things we did was we had a survey at the end of that. And after that survey, 2/3 of the citizens in the community said that what we were doing in the Office of Independent Review benefited the police services. But what was more astounding was that 80% of the public and the community that was surveyed said they had more confidence in the police department based upon the work I did in the Office of Independent Review. And that went from 68 to 80%. And the survey company that did that said they have never seen that happen. That was astounding that that could occur in 1 year. And they asked me, what did you do? And I said, it's a lot of hard work, day and night, and on the evenings, working with the community and answering their questions, being responsive, putting information on the website so they could see that. So that's what I did there, and I'm very proud of that work and working with the community on that.
A lot of work there. Thank you for that, Eddie. Moving on to our next piece here, what do you perceive the role of the OPA to be in broader discussions around public safety? And also, what alternative response models and services interest you, and will you actively advocate for these being developed in Seattle if you become the director?
Well, I'm on the page of the mayor here about One Seattle. When I heard that, I said, wow, that is exactly right on. So I'm looking at One Seattle accountability, and that would be, for this question, having OPA input and collaboration with the Office of Inspector General and the Police Commission to have unified response from all three organizations to go ahead and address these larger public safety issues. One of those I know that they're involved with and they're looking at is the mental health response. And it has to be thoughtful mental health response, because there's a lot of different models out there, and folks sometimes go into it very quickly and then find out that things aren't going to work, and then they lose funding. We don't want that to happen. And I think if we work together, we can do that. So it's a better utilization for the alternative response. But on the flip side of that is the mental health wellness of police department personnel. That's also important, because we want to have healthy officers with a clear mindset to respond to calls. The second thing is retention of police officers. That's a big deal right now, and with more mental health wellness for police personnel, that will help. And the last thing is the suicide rate. Officers end up committing suicide more than, and are killed more than any other kinds of crimes out there. So if they even deal with a deadly, a suspect with an arm that's armed or something like that, more officers are killed with their own weapons versus someone else's weapon. And all that mental health for not only the community, but for the police department and police personnel will help build trust and make the community safer.
Thank you. I just wanted to delve into that alternative response piece one more time, because there's a lot of discussion in this community about using non-sworn officers, and maybe that's part of the mental health issue that you were talking about there. Any other thoughts there about some of the ideas that could be used for those different type of responses and what you would advocate for?
Some of the response actually will start from dispatch, where they actually can triage and figure out what's going on, and asking very powerful and curious questions so that they can understand, is this a violent event that's going on? Is it a nonviolent act? Are there relatives available? Are there other people that are there to help? That way they can go ahead and triage that and have the nonviolent response team go there. And again, it depends on the model Seattle uses, whether it's a clinician and a citizen or a community member, or if it's a clinician and an officer. So it all has to work out, but I think the biggest thing is that we need to work with the whole community accountability with the Inspector General, the Police Commission, and OPA to actually work on that.
Thank you. Great. I wanted to ask our last question here. What would be a key indicator of success for you as OPA director if you're selected for the job?
Well, I guess I gave a hint of that a little bit earlier. My work in Fresno. So I think if we had results of public confidence that were similar or better than we had in Fresno, that would be one key indicator about success. It's not the whole success, but when the community is happy and they're satisfied that police services are where they want them to be, then that is really a key indicator. Now, one of those things that you would do is an external audit, and I would rely on, number one, the Inspector General's office to do those audits and have authentic and meaningful audits and conversations with, because that's what they do with OPA. But the other things, like I already talked about, was surveys in the community. I think that's highly, highly important to get community feedback so that the office of OPA can go ahead and navigate where they should go and where their efforts should go. And the last thing is internally, I think one of the things that we could do internally for OPA staff is performance coaching. Coaching is so important. It allows those individuals to help them be better, but they're the ones that are figuring it out, but they're having someone else coach them to get to that level so they can have a fulfilled career working at OPA. And the last thing about this whole thing is I am really big on achieving a unified goals as one Seattle accountability. I would love to have that the Inspector General, the Police Commission, and OPA have unified group goals every year that we can achieve together. That will help the community, and they will trust accountability, and they will trust the police department. So with that whole unified experience and that unified approach, I think there can be greater success for Seattle than there already is.
Thank you very much. I do have about a minute left of time for you. Anything you wanted to wrap up, final thoughts about why you think you're the right person for this job?
Oh, well, thank you. I have a 360-degree view of law and justice and community and civilian oversight. I'm a subject matter expert in oversight. I'm a certified practitioner of oversight through NACL, the National Association of Civilians over Law Enforcement Oversight. So, and I've done this for the law and justice and this whole evolution that I've had in my career for 40 years in California and in Washington. The other thing is that when I left the Santa Monica Police Department, a smaller police department, went to Los Angeles Police Department, a larger one, I did that because I wanted to impact the community I grew up in South Central Los Angeles. So Richmond, smaller agency, OPA, coming to Seattle. My wife is here. My family's here. That's why I want to be here and do this job.
Thank you very much. Eddie Aubry here, the Civilian Manager of the Office of Professional Accountability in Richmond, California. Appreciate your time. And right now, we'll be taking another quick break to bring in our next candidate. Please stay with us. We'll be back in just a couple minutes. here with you on Seattle Channel as we continue to talk with the different candidates for the position of Director of the Office of Police Accountability. And our next candidate is Valiza Nash, who is a supervising investigator for special victims from the Civilian Office of Police Accountability in Chicago, Illinois. Valiza, good to meet you. Thanks for taking the time. Yeah, put her there. All right, I wanted to get through these questions with you, and let's tackle the first one right away here. What is your track record for holding police officers to account for their actions and decisions?
Okay, under my leadership, officers understood that they would be held accountable for their actions if they worked outside the policies and procedures of the police department. As an officer and as a sergeant, I reported police misconduct and I imposed discipline, recommendations for discipline for misconduct. As the chief of police, I imposed disciplinary measures when officers operated outside the scope of their duties. In my role now, currently, I approve allegations and recommended findings.
Got it. And so you've been inside the police department, as it were, and worked outside it too. Is that accurate? How would you describe it, your experience?
As a sworn officer and as a civilian.
Got it. And I think the point that a lot of people are trying to get to, why is it important to have that civilian oversight over police agencies and police officers?
Well, I believe diversity as a whole is important. It's important to have the voice of law enforcement. It's also important to have the voice of the community that's impacted.
Got it. And the OPA would potentially be that voice, and the other arms of the OIG and the CPC here in Seattle, at least what we call them here.
That's correct.
Okay, got it. I'm going to move on to this next piece here with you, if I could. What will you do to separate police oversight from the police, who historically protect and defend themselves against accountability and oversight?
So that's a question that I can only answer in a way that I feel that the person is asking this question on. As an OPA director, I would just have to ensure that the investigations are done fairly. There's a fair process, and it's transparent, consistent for law enforcement officers and citizens.
Got it. Can you help me out with that? Because I think there's some insinuations within that question there that police officers want to protect and to defend themselves against accountability and oversight. Do you think that's true? Do officers want to shy away from this? You were a sworn officer. Help me out with this thought, please.
Well, I think that anyone would want to defend themselves against accusations or allegations that's against them, and it's only right that everyone has due process.
Got it. And then I guess taking it from the civilian side, it's important to, the police officer job I think feels different to some people because they carry a gun, et cetera. They're involved in these different situations. They want to make sure that these officers are held to a higher level of accountability. Do you think that's accurate? Well,
yes, officers should be held to a higher standard as average citizens, but citizens have to also understand that officers are human beings. Right? They have lives, they have responsibilities, and across the nation, globally, there are great officers out there that's doing the job. Mm-hmm. But there's a small percentage of officers that don't need to be in law enforcement, right? And that's what I've been working so hard to do as a sworn officer and as a civilian supervising investigator, is to ensure legitimacy back into law enforcement and ensure that citizens are protected from those officers that want to abuse that authority.
Just because we have 1 minute left, how difficult of a job is that?
Well, it's not difficult if that's what you're true to, right? That's my true passion. I love law enforcement. The legitimacy has to come back into law enforcement. The community has to trust the people that are supposed to protect them, and that's important.
Got it. Thank you. Thanks for breaking those pieces down with me, Valesa. Let me work to this next piece here. What prevents officers from being held accountable? That's a short question, but it's a big one there. What your thoughts about that?
It's short and big, yes. Yeah. There are a lot of factors. There's layers to that. And being an officer you work with people who carry guns. You have to trust them to have your back when you're responding to calls. And it could be fear, it could just be complacency, or And it's lack of accountability leadership side. And an effective accountability process as a whole. So there's a lot of factors to that.
I guess just in looking at this, how do you get more officers, rank and file officers, I'm thinking here, to buy into this whole concept of accountability? Because it's been talked about a lot. I know officers are looking at this program right now and saying, you know, what's going to be said about this? But how do you get officers to buy into that and maybe change the culture of a police department? I know you've heard that phrase before, too.
I have. And believe it or not, I believe that there are a lot of officers out there that wants the same thing. Right, and they're just fearful to say so. I think that's a fair thing with them, and they have to understand they have to be protected, right? There has to be an outlet for them to report without being exposed, because, like I said, they're human beings. They have families, and it's a real fear. Because what we do for a living, what I did for a living was carry a gun.
Yeah, got it. Thank you for talking to me about those pieces too. Let me move on to this next question here. What have you done to reach out directly to the community, especially the BIPOC community, to build trust and communicate how you are keeping law enforcement actions transparent and accountable? Specifically, what does accountability and transparency look like? There's another big question for you.
That's a huge one.
Yeah.
I would have to say that due to the systemic racial injustice in BIPOC community, measures have to be taken in order to identify those areas of misconduct. And that looks like having face-to-face interviews with those that community members that are impacted, in addition to providing a seat at the table for them so they can come up with solutions, help come up with solutions and draft and implement policies that ensure constitutional freedoms and their safety.
Got it. What does that look like, seat at the table? What do you mean by that? Being a part of a commission or something like that? Or
No, it's a part of brainstorming. Like what are the issues here that, what are the complaints? What do they feel would help the community? You know, you have to have input from all sides. Yeah. And it wouldn't just be the BIPOC community. Yeah. It would be law enforcement, it would be OPA, it would be OIG, it would be CPC, you know, law enforcement as a whole. Everyone needs a seat at the table to talk about these hard issues, the problems, and come up with solutions to implement those policies.
Got it. Right. And you would want to do outreach to these different communities to try to bring them in and get those reactions?
Absolutely. Yeah. That's the only way to build trust in the community and bridge those severed relationships.
Yeah. Thank you very much for that, Valesa. Let me move on to our next question here. What do you perceive the role of the OPA to be in broader discussions around public safety? That's the first half of the question. And then, what alternative response models or services interest you, and will you actively advocate for these being developed in Seattle if you become the director? Kind of a two-headed question there. Wherever you want to start is fine.
Well, I would say the role as a director is just to ensure that that process is a fair process and transparent process. In doing so, you have to build those relationships with Office of Internal General, the Community Police Commission, law enforcement, the community as a whole. Yeah. You know, just basically the internal and external stakeholders, being honest and transparent.
Yeah. Okay. Let's that next part of the question. You're heading there.
The second part of that question is that. Wait, give me the second part.
Yeah, it was in regard to alternative response models and services. What of those interests you? Will you actively advocate for those being developed in Seattle if you become the director?
Okay, so I'm a big proponent of crisis intervention. So it would be something aligned to that, and training officers in specialized clinical areas to be able to respond to citizens in crisis, whether it's mental health issues or if it's a person that onset crisis mode. Yeah. That way they can get those citizens to a safe place, to a place safely, put it that way.
Got it, thank you. And just, I know this is an issue for police departments all around the country, in Chicago and Seattle, all over the place, but developing those non-sworn officer models of response or whatever is a real challenge. Do you have any ideas of how to do that? I mean, the process through which that you would use there? It's a big question, I know, but I think that's a big one that Seattle's facing right now.
Well, most police departments today, officers are trained in other disciplines, degrees. Some of them have social work degrees, psychology degrees. And I would look at those officers to see if they're interested in a position as coming a clinician and provide provide that training for them, so that when a call is there is a call out for a crisis situation, they're there on the onset. And that looks like not dressed completely in a police uniform, but they are dressed soft clothes and they are protected, nothing exposed with a gun or anything like that.
Yeah.
The whole point of people in crisis is to get them to a place where they can receive the resources safely that they need. Because when you're dealing with people in crisis and mental illness, they don't ask for that, right? They didn't ask to be born with this. So. Yeah. Law enforcement's job is to help them get there safely.
Got it. I just want to ask a 30-second question. Have you ever dealt with a case like this as an officer yourself? Probably a few of them. What has that been like? What did you do?
I'm a crisis intervention instructor evaluator.
Thank you. So,
and I have dealt with, and I'll tell you one situation if
Please.
I can.
Yeah.
It was suicide by cop. The gentleman, it was the anniversary of this gentleman's son being murdered. And he told his wife that he was going to die by suicide by cop, right? And I was the only one trained in crisis intervention at that time on my department. I was the sergeant, and the officers that responded, I communicated with them over the radio, and I told them what they needed to do because they had not been trained. When I got there, I saw them trying to communicate with him. They took their time. They tried to communicate, but they got stuck. They didn't know what else to do. So I took over, and I listened to what he had to say and what the issues were. And I said, "Tell me about your son." And I saw his entire demeanor change. And he looked at me and he said he was murdered. He was an artist. He was a basketball player. And I said, "Tell me more about that." Yeah. Right? So I gave him an outlet to talk to his son. And I said, "Sir," I said, "I don't have a choice but to take you to the hospital." I said, "I'm sorry." I said, "Is there anything else that I can get you in order to get you to go there safely?" And he said, "Can my wife come?" And I said, "Absolutely, your wife can come." So I said, "I can take you to the hospital, or I can have the ambulance take you." Wow. And so he opted out for the ambulance to go, and I followed him there. Yeah. It's just being honest. It's listening. What is the underlying issue of what's going on? Yeah. A lot of times, officers, we're programmed to run in and take names. Yep. and what's the problem? Give me your name, date of birth, and handle that. And go to the next call. We're not trained to take a step back and actually listen to the issues of the person that's in crisis.
Thank you for sharing all of that with us. I really appreciate that. Last question here. What would be a key indicator of success for you as OPA director?
Well, gaining the trust of the citizens and law enforcement that we are conducting fair and transparent investigations. Not every outcome is going to be favorable. But knowing that process is fair is what I would like to achieve, to know that I have succeeded. And
thank you. I've got a little bit more time left for you here. Just any final thoughts about why you think you might be the best person for this job, just to let the public know about that?
Yeah, I think that, I care about law enforcement, I care about citizens, I care about the safety of citizens. I don't think that, I think we can recognize officers who are egregiously committing misconduct, but officers are human beings, they make mistakes, but they also have to be held accountable. And I truly believe that, having a fair process, they may not like it, but they'll accept it because it's fair. And I think that, being a prior law enforcement officer and a civilian oversight supervisor, I believe that I am the best person to run OPA as a director.
Great. Valesa, thank you very much. That's Valesa Nash we've been talking to here, Supervising Investigator, Special Victims for the Civilian Office of Police Accountability in Chicago, Illinois. All right, we have one more candidate that we're going to bring in here. We're going to get Valesa out of here and bring that next candidate in. Please stay with us. We'll be back in just a few minutes. Hi, Brian Callanan back with you here on Seattle Channel as we bring you our fourth and final candidate for the position of Director of the Office of Police Accountability for the City of Seattle, and that is Gino Betts, the Assistant State Attorney at the Community Justice Center within the Cook County State's Attorney's Office in Chicago, Illinois. Gino, good to meet you. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much for your time.
Yeah, and I wanted to make sure we ask these questions that the public has passed along to us, and we'll start with the first one here. What is your track record for holding police officers to account for their actions and decisions?
So I got into police accountability around 2017. This was after we saw
Okay.
a wave.
Sorry, raise up that mic just a little bit, Gino. There you go.
Is that
Yeah,
better?
yeah. Start again, please.
Okay,
Yeah,
sure.
I'll restart the time. Yeah, go ahead.
I got into police accountability in about 2017. That was after we saw a wave of police misconduct captured on video across the country. So in New York, we saw Eric Gardner. In Minnesota, it was Philando Castile. And then right in my city of Chicago, there was the murder of Laquan McDonald. And after that happened, Chicago restructured its police accountability framework. They created a new iteration of police accountability, further invested.
Gino, hold on one second. I want to make sure I get something right here.
Sure.
Let me take this right. Okay. had a sneaky feeling that microphone wasn't on correctly, but we could hear the top of that. Could you, let's restart that. I want to make sure that we give you the right time and people can hear you exactly with what you wanted to say. I'll re-ask the question here. What's your track record for holding police officers to account for their actions and decisions?
So my track record with police accountability started in about 2017. I was introduced to the concept of police accountability after we saw a national wave of police misconduct captured on video. So in New York, we saw Eric Gardner. In Minnesota, we saw Philando Castile. And then in my city, in my backyard, there was the murder of Laquan McDonald. And when that happened, the city responded by further investing in police accountability, police oversight. They further invested in the agency, the oversight agency. It's called the Civilian Office of Police Accountability. I was selected to be a part of the inaugural class of that agency. So some of my most meaningful professional work was done at that agency. I served as an attorney for a team that investigated police officers accused of misconduct. Now, one of the most gratifying cases that I had the opportunity to work on involved a police sergeant. His name is Ronald Watts, who ran a team of corrupt police officers. They were essentially extorting drug dealers in the neighborhood. Why would they select drug dealers? Because they knew that no one would believe drug dealers when they reported that the police was extorting them. So this went on for a long time. For the drug dealers who pushed back and refused to be extorted, they were wrongfully arrested and ultimately convicted. So the administrative investigations that I was a part of led to the discipline of several of those involved officers. It also led to the imprisonment of some of those officers and ultimately the overturning of over 200 of those wrongfully convicted community members who were the victims of Sergeant Watts' team.
Wow. Do you, well, I thank you for that answer.
Sure.
I think we're going to get into some more of these pieces here in just a little bit. I wanted to talk about this next question that we got from the public here. What will you do to separate police oversight from police who historically protect and defend themselves against accountability and oversight?
Right, so I think that question is directed toward the framework of OPA.
Yes.
How it's currently structured, where it's predominantly sworn officers investigating allegations of misconduct against other sworn officers. I'm not personally aware of any research or data that suggests that that is inherently wrong or that somehow compromises the integrity of the investigation. However, what I would say is that the optics of it is not a great look, right? At least from the community's perspective. And that's a perspective that's been shaped by decades of police abuse and distrust that's been built up. So the optics of it don't look great, even though I'm sure these officers are doing the best that they can do. I don't know what authority I would have as OPA director to change that, because it's really comes down to the collective bargaining agreement,
right,
that requires that it's 7 out of the 9 investigators are sworn officers, and then the other 2 can be civilians, but those 2 civilians can't work on any cases that will lead to the termination of an officer. So it's really a conversation that needs to be had.
If you had your druthers, what would it be? More civilian involvement with those investigation pieces?
So my background is coming from Chicago. We have an agency of over 60 civilian investigators. We have no sworn investigators. So I've seen it work. I know it can work. I'm not opposed to having sworn investigators, but I think it has to be a more balanced approach.
Got it. Thank you for breaking that piece down with us. I'll move on to this next question here. What prevents officers from being held accountable? This is a bigger question than it seems. We've heard some interesting answers tonight. Your thoughts on this?
I feel like we're going to be talking about the CBA all night.
Yeah,
because it really comes down to the collective bargaining agreement, right? We have a pretty strong and robust accountability ordinance here in Seattle, but it's undermined by terms in the CBA that
police accountability should not be negotiated in a labor negotiation agreement. I think police have done a masterful job, not only here in Seattle, police unions, but nationwide, of turning what has historically been a labor negotiation, which would consist of, salaries and benefits and vacation days, things of that nature, and making it into a legal shield against police accountability. So that's one thing. Another thing with the CBA, the covering of private arbitrators to basically undermine discipline handed down by the police chief. Right. That's another thing. So that's done behind closed doors. We can't scrutinize it from a public perspective. So anything that is done in the dark, to me is personally a red flag. I think we also need a stronger decertification database, right? We shouldn't have officers floating from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, looking for employment. And I think it should be expanded to a national database. So you can't go from Seattle. If you were SPD and you were disciplined or terminated, you shouldn't be able to go to Chicago and become an officer. Yeah.
I guess, and I know this is an issue that happens in police departments all around the country, but have you had dealings with police unions and talked about issues like these? Some thoughts about that?
So I've had conversations with the public about these issues.
I see, okay.
I've dealt with police accountability where I was handicapped from doing certain things because of collective bargaining agreements. So that's my experience with CBAs.
Okay, it's a complicated picture.
It is.
And you would like the OPA, I don't want to put words in your mouth, would you like the OPA to have a stronger role in that CBA process, or is there anything you'd want to add to that just to wrap up this thought?
I don't know that we would have a seat at the table when it comes to those negotiations, but I will publicly state my objections to certain parts of it.
Okay.
Including the inclusion of police accountability being a part of those negotiations.
Great, thank you for breaking that down with me. Let's go on to another question. This is another big one here. What have you done in your work to reach out directly to the community, especially the BIPOC community, to build trust and communicate how you are keeping law enforcement actions transparent and accountable? Specifically, what does accountability and transparency look like to you?
Sure, so I was born and raised on the west side of Chicago. I don't know if it gets more BIPOC than that. That's the capital of BIPOC. But in my current role at the State's Attorney's Office, I am a community justice prosecutor. So it's a bifurcated role. Part of my time is spent prosecuting violent offenses. The other part is working within the BIPOC communities, educating them about public safety, the criminal justice system. When I worked at the Civilian Office of Civilian Office of Police Accountability.
There you go. Yeah, you got it.
That was a part of my role too. I would take every opportunity that I could to get out into the community and engage. And I really believe that whether as a prosecutor or as an attorney at COPA, we have to be visible in the community well before we ask the community for help with anything, right?
Yeah. What does that outreach look like? Is it visiting with different community groups?
Sure.
Give me a picture of that.
So in my current role, you can find me on, we call them beat meetings in Chicago. So these are police-hosted meetings, but they are to host the community and update them on crime and public safety concerns. Yeah. To your point about police accountability, I recall recently at a beat meeting, there was a citizen. He told the officers, hey, I witnessed one of my neighbors get arrested. He was pulled from his car. They searched the car. They searched my neighbor. They actually pulled down his pants in the public and searched his naked body. Yeah. Who can I talk to about that? And of course, the police, they were silent. They didn't want to talk about the police oversight agencies. But, I took that opportunity to educate not only that person, but everyone else that there is an agency out there that is tasked specifically with investigating that type of situation.
I see. So the beat meetings are an important part of that. Is that something you do regularly, that type of outreach there?
I do beat meetings almost every other night.
I see.
I host webinars where I educate the public on the criminal justice system, the role of a prosecutor within that system. I do webinars, I do mock trials in schools, so my week is always different.
I have 30 seconds left on this. It just sounds like that piece of it, that outreach, is a really important part of what transparency is all about, in your view.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I am 100% a huge proponent of transparency. You know, the ultimate goal is to rebuild community trust in the police accountability framework. Transparency is an easy tool to get us there.
Yeah.
It's kind of low-hanging fruit. I know in Chicago, and forgive me for keep talking about Chicago.
No,
it's
just that's where you're doing it.
That's
yeah.
my frame of reference.
Yeah.
But in Chicago, we release video, body-worn camera squad video within 60 days of the incident. So that's something I would like to bring to Seattle as OPA director as well.
Got it. To make sure that video is getting out there more quickly?
Absolutely, as quickly as possible. As long as we're not compromising the integrity of our investigation, I feel like we should release it to the public.
Got it. Thank you. Appreciate that point, too. Let's ask this next question here, and this is kind of a double-headed question here for you. What do you perceive the role of the OPA to be in broader discussions around public safety? That's the first part. And what alternative response models and services interest you, and will you actively advocate for those being developed in Seattle if you become the director?
Right, so I think police accountability it directly impacts public safety. If people have confidence in the systems that we create in police oversight, and they have confidence that our investigations will be thorough, will be competent, and will be independent, then they are more likely to uphold the rule of law. So that directly impacts public safety. What I think accountability looks like, accountability is kind of twofold, right? There is front-end accountability that addresses, policy work. I think the community should have a strong position and a strong voice when it comes to shaping police policy. And then there's the back-end work that OPA does, investigating individual cases of police misconduct. So that's what I will be doing as OPA director. There's still a role for the community, but those investigations will not be swayed by public opinion.
Got it. Let's talk about that second piece there, this whole concept of alternative response models and services.
Absolutely.
What you think about those, would you advocate those if you got the job?
I absolutely would advocate for them. I was excited to see the expansion of the Health One units. I think that is a great start. I think we ask a lot of police right now when it comes to responding to calls for service. I don't know that police would be the best suited unit to respond to certain calls, like a behavioral health concern or a mental health episode or a homeless person being asked to leave. I think there are other avenues to explore before activating police.
Got it. And those would work with the police department? I'm asking you an impossible question because we don't know what this would look like. But do you have any thoughts about that? What would that look like? Different type of responses?
I think it depends on the nature of the call.
Of course,
If there's an indication that there is a chance for violence, then of course you want to have the police present as well.
Yeah.
But a lot of these calls for service, most of the calls of service that the police get are not for violent offenses or violent crimes.
Right.
So we can call, like with Health One unit, it's an EMT and it's a social worker that can connect folks with resources. We need more of that.
Yeah, got it. Thank you for breaking that piece down. Got one final question here. What would be a key indicator of success for you as OPA director if you got the job?
So I think the number one measure of success would be, are we growing public confidence in police accountability? That's the number one thing. Number two is, are we collaborating with the stakeholders, whether it's OIG, CPC, the community, are we collaborating to address police accountability? Number three is, are we building confidence within the community, not only just the civilians, but also the police members? We want them to buy into it as well, right?
Yeah.
That's really important. So one tool that has proven to be a good way to get to bring satisfaction to both the accused officer and the complainant is mediation. So that's another tool that had to stop because of COVID, but that's something that I would look to bring back as OPA director.
Got it. And just because we have a couple minutes left
Sure.
here, anything you want people to know about you other than what you said already, and maybe why you think you're the right person for this job?
So I do believe, I'm sure we have a bunch of qualified candidates. I think my perspective is very balanced. Like I said, I have the experience of being a prosecutor that shapes my view on police accountability. I also have the experience of being a black man or a black boy raised on the west side of Chicago. So it's the personal and the professional experience that I'm bringing to the table that gives me a very balanced approach.
All right, thank you very much. This is Gino Betts we're talking to here, folks. He's the Assistant State Attorney at the Community Justice Center within the Cook County State's Attorney's Office in Chicago, Illinois. The fourth and final candidate we're talking to here for our public forum on the candidates for Director of the Office of Police Accountability. Okay, to wrap things up here, the mayor will be meeting with these candidates on Friday, June 10th. If you would like to provide feedback on these candidates, you can do so by completing a survey, which you will find a link to when this forum is posted to seattlechannel.org. So make sure you keep an eye out for that. That'll be happening soon. That survey will remain open until June 15th. Again, the mayor will be looking into this, and the mayor's appointment is subject to a background check by the Washington State Patrol, and we anticipate an announcement about this position in early July. So again, please do watch for this program to be posted on seattlechannel.org. Make sure you give your feedback by June 15th. And thank you very much for joining us here. I'm Brian Callanan, and thank you for watching this special presentation of this public forum on Seattle Channel.